Hello, it's Sobering Maid from Make More Noise, and we have a bit of bonus content for you. Our very own DJ Lippy is here speaking to another prominent feminist activist on another podcast. Now, for one reason or another, the interview didn't get used, but they have very kindly given us the audio files and said that we could release it under the Make More Noise banner. So please listen to DJ Lippy talking about the Manchester ReSisters, the Resistor Network, who they are, what they are, why they sprung up, and what they sprung up in reaction to.
Let's start at the beginning. A number of feminist groups sprung up after proposals to change the Gender Recognition Act. If we can explore that a little bit, that would be great, especially for people who are new to this topic. So can you tell us a bit about the proposals that were made to change the Gender Recognition Act, and let's have a look at why feminists were concerned about those proposals.
As it stands, if you are transgender and you would like to get a birth certificate issued, a new birth certificate issued, which would change your legal sex, then as it stands, you need to get a gender recognition certificate. And to get one of these, it's basically like a bureaucratic process. I believe there's like a panel of, 2 people who decide. You have to collect lots of evidence. You have to have 2 years living as the opposite sex. You have to make changes like change your passport, change your driver's license, go to the bank, tell them that you'd like to be treated as a male or a female. And also, I think you need to have doctor supervision, so a doctor needs to show that you have a condition which is known as gender dysphoria, which is where you feel like you were born in the wrong body. And you have to either be intending to undergo medical transition or to undergo medical transition. Now, what this means, basically, it could just mean taking hormones. It doesn't mean getting the full sex reassignment surgery. So it's quite a long process. If you've been living as a woman for 2 years and you can get all this information together, you go in front of a panel of experts, you never get to meet them, and they can issue you with a gender recognition certificate. Since it was introduced, I think there have been 5,000 certificates issued, and campaigners say it's too bureaucratic and it's too lengthy and they'd like to streamline the process. But the proposals are basically to make it just as simple as signing a piece of paper. The argument is that people know their own gender better than you do. It's their business, so they're going to be able to just go, sign a piece of paper, get a gender recognition certificate, they'll have a new birth certificate issued, and the law will have to legally treat them as the sex that they want to be treated as.
And can you tell us a little bit about feminist concerns around these proposals?
Our concerns are not against transgender people, but against predatory men who will take advantage of this system. We know that 98% of all sexual assaults are committed by males, 95% of all violent offences globally, I believe, is committed by males. And you've seen time and time again where they've created a system. Look at the Catholic Church. People said people wouldn't go to the extreme length of becoming a priest to abuse children. They have, sports coaches. They have all these areas. If there's a system where you're allowing access to vulnerable people, it's going to be exploited. This gender recognition certificate, the proposals, you wouldn't have to make any changes to your appearance. You wouldn't have to take any medications. Anybody who wanted to could just change their sex and they'll have to be treated as such. And we've already seen this happening in prisons where they've allowed people to transition into the female estate. They've gone on to sexually assault 4 women. There's literally in about 4 days, this dude got sent over there, Karen White, moved into a female prison. There's no evidence that that person is transgender or lived as the opposite gender before they went into prison. They just used it to get easy access to women and also have an easier time. Women's prisons are a lot easier than men's prisons. And there are a lot of prisoners who are transitioning. I think there's currently 123 transgender prisoners on the transgender male prisoners. And it's been proven with some evidence that 42% of them were in jail for a sex offence. Obviously, this is endangering women's safety. If these proposals come in, it's going to be very difficult for prison services and other services to maintain sex segregation for specific instances that keep women safe, like changing rooms, rape crisis centres, places where women are vulnerable.
For people who are listening, who are brand new to this debate, this discussion, the strapline for ReSisters United is biology is not bigotry, gender is a social construct. Should we just have a look at those 2 terms, particularly, like I say, for those who are new to the debate?
Okay, so when we talk about this debate, we're talking about the difference between sex and gender, and our concern is that in law, they're replacing sex with the word gender, and this is causing a lot of problems. Now, for us, your biological sex, that's whether or not you're born male or female, that's your reproductive capacity. To us, as feminists, our understanding is this is the reason why women have been oppressed It's because we can get pregnant. So, for instance, like all that slut shaming, it's all about making sure that you don't go off and have sex with lots of different men, so that, you know, your husband knows that that child belongs to him. Your property, your womb is the man's property. Now, obviously, things have changed now, but that's the history of our biology. Gender, it's all the sort of social stereotypes that come with being a man or a woman. Your gender is like, you know, little girls like playing with pink and being kind, and, you know, women like shoes and haircuts and makeup and things like that. Men, they like, you know, little boys play with blue, play with guns, talk to be like spacemen when they grow up. You know, men like being in control, running Fortune 500 companies. You know, this is a social construct that is imposed upon us from birth, and it maintains male superiority to female. We're taught to defer to men. Female socialisation affects our behaviour. So I think the biology is not bigotry. Nowadays, woman is becoming like a dirty word. To talk about being female and to talk about your biology, that's seen as exclusionary, transphobic even. When to us as feminists, that's the root of our oppression, and we need to be able to talk about that. Even just in a basic way, of women need to talk about their bodies, because there's problems with conditions like endometritis. You know, a lot of women struggle with that and they don't talk about it. The doctors don't take it seriously. There's no pain medication, there's no treatment, really good treatment for it. It's because our biology is shunned, and it always has been, but now it's being done in a politically correct way. And again, gender is a social construct, so instead of enshrining gender into law, which is a very subjective definition anyway, to me what a gender is very different to somebody else's definition. So it's not concrete, it's going to be confusing in the law books, but it's being changed in a lot of local council policies. The protected characteristic is sex, which is your biology, but a lot of council the equalities legislation is written as gender, which again, that's the social construct. So we think that's problematic, and it's not just in one country, it's across the world. This is happening, the slow loss of the sex to replace it with gender. At the root of what we're doing, this is what we're fighting against. We need to get everybody to remind that women are a sex class, not a gender class. You can't opt out of your own oppression.
I think a lot of feminist groups sprung up, focusing on things like public awareness. And I think as feminists, of course, we have a right to self-organise. We have to have a right to self-organise as an oppressed group. And Women's Place UK has done some very good work as well, saying that the law must work for women, and that we demand an end to violence against women, and we must be allowed to engage in this process and this public discussion. So the Liverpool ReSisters, I believe, was the first group that came out, the first ReSisters group that started. Where did that spring from?
It's quite an unusual, it's quite an interesting story, it's quite a strange story. On Twitter there was a post, a picture put up, and it was on Crosby Beach. I don't know if you know, there's the Anthony Gormley, I think there's 1,000 statues in the stand. Anthony Gormley's famous for just statues of himself. So there's all these metal statues. Somebody's put a tiny little penis sticker on this statue, and on the penis sticker is written, "Women don't have penises," which is to draw attention to the fact that according to transgender charity Gyres, 85% of trans women keep their penises, fully intact penises. So a lot of women think if you have a penis, then you can't really be a woman, can you? So it was just a jokey, funny way to raise awareness. There's a campaigner known as Sticker Woman. These stickers sprung up all around the country. So a group called themselves Liverpool ReSisters, they put a post up on the internet, basically a tiny little sticker on the corner of the sign outside the artwork at Crosby Beach. This was picked up on social media. The mayor of Liverpool, Joe Anderson, reacted. He went crazy. He was told that this was a transphobic hate campaign that was being orchestrated by the Liverpool ReSisters. He threatened to get the police involved. He said, you know, transphobia has no place in our city. A real overreaction, basically. There was later a meeting at Liverpool City Council where the ReSisters had a right to sort of speak and to give their position. If you've got the internet, go and Google it. Have a look for this speech. It's very interesting. Basically, the mayor responded to these very, very nicely worded complaints. They were basically just trying to say women need sex-segregated spaces. We're vulnerable. We need to be listened to. The mayor responded by removing all single-sex spaces under the jurisdiction of Liverpool City Council. So like your swimming pool changing rooms, they're all going to go gender neutral, or the toilets are going to go gender neutral. I believe the Liverpool Police Force spent £10 million on making all their facilities gender neutral. So the changing rooms and the toilets and the showering facilities now, if you're a female police officer in Liverpool, you've got no privacy. And he did this. He basically said, because of the hateful and bullying actions of the Liverpool ReSisters, Liverpool United, and I swear that there was probably been about 5 women in this group at the time. It wouldn't have been that big. It just was a few women. So he removed all of this protection for all women in Liverpool, and he stated at the time that it was because I've been bullied by these stickers, by this tiny little sticker. Now, women have got a lot of concerns about safeguarding in these situations. There's evidence 90% of all sexual assaults that occur in changing rooms, places like that in the UK, they happen in gender-neutral spaces. There was a case recently, I think, in a Bath swimming pool had a gender-neutral space. Women complained, there's men walking around with their penis out in the shared changing space, and this is shared for like children as well. Women and children. There will be people taking advantage of it to expose themselves. What right do you have to say anything now? Because that's a public space. It was a female-only space. You've lost your right to complain against somebody exposing themselves to you. Basically, it might be an accident. Maybe the towel did slip, but women are worried anyway. And what was really interesting, what came out of this was allegations resurfaced a few years ago. There was a court case. A Labour councillor was accused. He was a teacher at a boys' school, and he'd been looking on the school internet and he typed in Lolita and child porn. So this triggered a police investigation. The police were going to go and raid his house to find his hard drive. Somehow Joe Anderson found out about this and he tipped the guy off. This was the defendant in court. He said he was informed about the police investigation by Joe Anderson the night before the police arrived at his property.
And Joe Anderson is the Mayor of Liverpool.
Joe Anderson is the Mayor of Liverpool, who reacted angrily and who removed all the single-sex spaces. Now he tipped off this person accused of paedophilia. Subsequently, 207 files were deleted from his computer. What was on those files, we don't know. Subsequently led to the trial collapsing, basically, because they didn't have enough evidence. And it's all because Joe Anderson told his friend, accused of paedophilia, the police are onto you, mate. So really, women are just incensed by this. You can't make it up. You really could not make it up. The media won't pick this up. I think this is a national story. I think people should be talking about this. It's being silenced. Whenever I tell my mates about it, they're like, no. They don't believe me when I tell them all these crazy stories. They think that I'm making it up, and I'm like, you can Google it. It's all out there. It's real. I'm not lying. So that's what kicked the ball rolling.
And this silencing of women is turning out to be a theme throughout. If you look at social media, women being kicked off from social media platforms like Twitter, local councils. I'm thinking particularly of Leeds in this instance, who refuse to allow women to meet to discuss the issues of a public consultation, and a council refused to let them meet. And this silencing and threatening of women is a pervasive thing that we're seeing in this debate. Another thing we're seeing is the language, the challenge to language, the changing of language. Now, whenever you get some political debate, the power of changing language and seizing hold of that language, controlling that language is immense. And I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about that, both in terms of the politics of language, but also the accessibility of language. Yeah,
well, to me, I just think the word woman is becoming a dirty word. The word female, to talk about your biology as a woman, it's seen as exclusionary because it excludes males. It excludes transgender women who are biologically male, don't feel like this relates to them. I think Munro Bergdorf is a trans woman in the UK. There was a women's march, I think last year, and he asked everybody not to talk about biology, please, because it's exclusionary. Now, to be told that you're not allowed to talk about female biology on a women's march is disgraceful. I don't think men realise how silenced we are talking about our bodies. We don't talk about things. You've got massive health inequalities that are caused because women are ashamed of their bodies and they don't talk about it. And so, basically, they've got all this new PC language as well. Instead of, woman is a hateful word, so we're going to let's think of another word, what's a better word? Menstruator. Yeah, we'll call women menstruators. There was the last women's march a little while ago. There was a tweet going out, and I swear they're just trying to troll women now. It said something along the lines of in 1922 there were 27 menstruators in Parliament. you know, okay, if you're trying to sell sanitary products to people, maybe you decide that insulting your target audience by calling them all menstruators is a good idea. But on a woman's march, you know, and also other language like they use when we're talking about our biology. There was a thing recently, the National Cancer Research UK, I believe it was. Correct me if I'm wrong. They wanted to raise awareness about smear tests and cervical screening. So they basically put a notice out and said, are you a cervix haver? Have you had a smear test recently? You know, and I think cervix. I had to look at what a cervix was, and I've got a degree. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so elitist, this language, and it's really going to hit effectively working class women, people without an education, and immigrants, women who don't have English as a first language. You know, might not know what that word is. I don't think people realise how poorly educated a lot of people are in the UK. The average reading age in the UK, I think, is like 9 years old. So does a 9-year-old know what a cervix is? No. A 9-year-old doesn't know what a cervix is. And now you see the effects of this. Like, we're already, smear tests are at an all-time low, and it's affecting women's health. Women are getting cancer and dying, easily preventable. If they just would have, you know, gone to get the smear test. And with language like this, like, it's so elitist, but it's portrayed as being inclusive and somehow, you know, a lot of this talk about intersectionality, I feel like it's talking about intersectionality, but actually intersectionality is about getting to, like, the disenfranchised women and the women who, you know, women of colour, women, working class women who are oppressed more than all the others. So why are you using this language that nobody understands except the people that went to the Oxford Intersectional Feminist Society? They're the only people who can speak about these issues now.
And so women feel disengaged from and disencouraged from participating in the debate, even if they have very real concerns. And they do have very real concerns. If you speak to women outside of political activism, there are huge concerns that are coming through. Being able to articulate those and engage in the debate is really important.
Yeah, well, all like working class women I speak to, like, they're not happy with it. They just put up with it. I think they're just like, this is just the way it is now, and they don't like it, but that's the problem. They've been like, we are socialised to just put up and shut up, you know, just go along with it, and it's really scaring people as well. Like, if you're in your local work, your policy, you can't talk about this because it's seen as a hate crime to ask certain questions or to say men can't be women. That'll get you kicked off Twitter if you say something like that these days, and it's ridiculous because it doesn't go both ways. Women are not seen as a oppressed minority.
I think it's important as well to say that the European Human Rights Commission has just clarified that saying trans women are biologically male is not hate speech. So it's really important that police forces up and down the country clarify that they will not pursue people for saying this and exploring this topic, given that this would be an absolute abuse of their power. And I think another group that's been severely hit by the language is lesbians, being told that they cannot be same-sex attracted, that even stating that is transphobic. And certainly in Manchester, we're going to come and look at some local concerns now, the putting up of TERFs not welcome, TERFs being trans-exclusionary radical feminists or women who just want to protect sex-based rights, are not welcome. And that, particularly if you're looking at the gay village in Manchester, would hit lesbian women, and that is utterly deplorable.
Yeah, no, I think that one thing that I think when I got into this debate about a year ago, and as I was learning it all, it took me a long time to break through that inbred bias I have against women, because all these women were speaking to me really kindly, really nicely, and really informed, and, you know, on the other side I try and ask them questions, and I was just like walking on eggshells, and I got called awful things. Kind of made me, you know, see what was going on, really. But one thing that really got to me was the cotton ceiling rhetoric. Now, this is appalling, and this gets most women. I don't care if you're like gay, bi or straight, like, it's disgusting. There's a phrase called the cotton ceiling, and basically you've got the glass ceiling, which feminists have thought, you know, we want to break through all the barriers to employment, and we think we should be lawyers and doctors and politicians, and why can't I be the Prime Minister? Yeah, that's the glass ceiling. The cotton ceiling is basically lesbians' underwear. It basically says, all these lesbians, they're being hypocrites. They're letting us come to their bars and they're being friends with us in the corners. You know, they're saying, yeah, you are a woman. But when I say to her, okay, do you want to go on a date? They always say, oh no, sorry, I'm a lesbian. Their argument is that these silly lesbians have created a barrier to them, like, and they're being persecuted or something. So you know, and you think people are making it up, but it's not, it's real. Go online communities, you can see for yourself, join a few online communities and see, it's very subtly done, the language that is used. Women are just not allowed to say no. Lesbians are not allowed to say no. And all you need to say is, no, I'm a lesbian. They don't even need to say I'm a lesbian, they just say, I don't want to, just no. No's not good enough, there's always got to be a reason why. And lesbians have been demonised and kind of excluded from the LGBT community. I think there's another thing, that LGBTQ, what does Q mean? Queer can mean anything, and it allows straight people to come in and boss everybody about, which is another thing that's happening now. And it's something that I get really upset about, because I just think, leave lesbians alone. Just like it's obviously just men's rights to women's bodies, because they could go after bisexual women. There's a lot of straight women who wouldn't mind being with a guy who identifies as a woman, you know what I mean? Like, it's never stopped, like, David Bowie pulling. It never stops Mark Bolan pulling. Like, women don't mind guys who are a bit effeminate. They actually think it's quite sexy. But it's the targeting the lesbians that makes me just feel like, to be honest, I think trans rights activism is like rape activism all the ways through. It just keeps telling you women have no rights to any boundaries, they've no rights to spaces away from males. And there was something, I'm going to show you this now, because I saw this image on the interweb. University of Bristol put this sign up in a toilet in the university, and this brought it all home to me. If you're in a public bathroom and you think a strange gender does not match the sign on the door, follow these steps. 1. Don't worry about it, they know better than you. There you go, women, stop being bigots, you know.
That's a huge dismissal of women's legitimate concerns.
Yeah, you know, and I think it's a lot of the resistance to women's concerns. I think it really comes down to people saying not all men. You should trust men. I think men are sick of being told that they're predatory and that they're violent, and they can't really challenge it because we live in a PC world. But I think this is the vehicle through which they're able to reassert their boundaries against women. Which it feels like that could be, this is one of the mechanisms by which they are taking away women's rights and reasserting their rights to all public spaces. Because when you say gender neutral, it's not gender neutral, it's unisex, and unisex really means a male space.
So following on from that, women around the UK saw what Liverpool ReSisters were doing, and other groups as well. And there were some particular concerns in Manchester. Do you want to talk a bit about those?
Yeah, well, this is just from going for a few meetings, and a lot of the schools have changed all the toilets to gender neutral toilets. Speaking to one of the girls in the Manchester Feminist Network about her niece's school has recently changed it, and the niece is really unhappy, but instead of saying anything, she can't say anything because it's all being portrayed as being mean and exclusionary. So basically, she just doesn't go to the toilet all day in school. She won't go. She doesn't drink. She doesn't feel comfortable sharing the spaces with teenage boys. And I don't think people remember. Do you remember what it was like to be a teenage girl? It's excruciatingly embarrassing. Just everything, like even changing rooms, changing in front of other girls. It's like one of the worst things you can imagine doing. And so to take away these spaces, the toilets, you know, if people forget girls are on their periods, you know, like they might want to change a tampon, they won't be able to do that. Leads on to, you know, again, it's so elitist because there's a lot of evidence now about, like, there's a campaign, stopping period poverty, which is a very well-intentioned campaign to, you know, a lot of poor women because they can't afford sanitary products. They're missing school on those days. You know, what's to say girls who are like on a heavy flow of their period and they can't use the toilet facilities, they're just going to try and stay off school. So again, it's just disenfranchising women. It's not going to affect men. You know, that they don't pay no heed. I don't know. Maybe teenage boys are also deserving of some privacy as well. I don't think this is a gendered issue. I think men have a right to spaces for where they're naked and vulnerable, where they don't want to be, you know, have people looking in on them. I can appreciate that, you know, but it is impacting on women, and this is just a small thing. I feel like it's grooming girls, it's teaching them their boundaries are hateful, and it's again, I just think it's grooming culture. It's like a rape culture, you know, but taught in schools and coming from a high up, but policed with this language of inclusion and tolerance, and turning it into like an LGBT issue, so it's akin to homophobia if you want to have a gender separate space. which it's got nothing to do with that. I think women just got a right to say no. They just want to be safe when they're vulnerable.
And you mentioned hospital wards before as well.
Yeah, so this is something else. I believe the hospitals in Manchester have introduced a self-ID policy onto the hospital wards, and they say it's getting ahead of the law. There's a lot of organisations that are doing this. They're acting as if we've changed the law, which we haven't. So basically they're allowing people can choose which gender they would like to stay on. Now, I've worked in hospital wards. This is I know this area, and I just think this is incredibly unsafe for women, regardless of whether or not that person is behaving in an inappropriate manner. There are very intimate procedures that are carried out on hospital wards. You do have screens, and you do try and respect everybody's privacy, but occasionally things happen, In that situation, I think both sexes want to have some privacy away from people. It's about dignity. And also I think you've got a lot of safety issues nowadays. The elderly population is a huge new thing. So imagine you're going to have a lot of patients with dementia who won't understand what is happening. So let's say you've got a urology ward, you've got a patient who's in because keep getting bladder infections because they're old and they have dementia. They're staying on the ward next to some, a biological male. That's going to be so traumatising for them. Also not safe if that person could be experiencing sexually inappropriate behaviour. So is it up to the nurses now to manage this situation? Again, it's very elitist, because really it's going to be nurses who are having to manage this delicate situation. It's going to be more from the not healthcare assistants, who are working class women of colour, a lot of immigrant labour. It's the nursing profession is very mixed, but it's putting it on women and it's putting it on the disenfranchised and dressing it up as like this great civil rights movement. But it's the most elitist thing I can imagine, and it's women who will have to manage that situation in a hospital ward.
Thank you. And I think we've talked a bit about the language, we've talked a bit about healthcare inequality, and the Gender Recognition Act proposed changes. I think another local thing that's happened recently is Greater Manchester Police putting out a tweet onto social media saying that TERF is a neutral term, that TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminists, like say women who want to maintain sex-based rights, is utilised as a term to silence women, and often it is linked to a threat. So for Greater Manchester Police to put out the message that TERF is a neutral term, I think was a misstep on their part.
Yeah, I think it's giving legitimacy to this sort of language. And the ironic thing is, this was literally, okay, you couldn't make this up again, I feel like I'm making it up. It was a response to somebody who asked a question now. They'd put out a tweet. There's a week of hate crime action this week where they're going out and educating different people about hate crime legislation, what you can do if you've been a victim of hate crime, what they can do they were really trying to engage more with like disenfranchised communities. So there was a tweet out saying, come down to this meeting, Now, a few feminists got on the thing, and one of them was, will you do something about the use of the word TERF, because I feel like this is a hateful term, a problematic term used to silence women and incite violence against them. And that's when the comment was made. So the fact is that the police are using hateful language and bigoted language to talk about an event that's supposed to tackle hate crime. It really doesn't leave you feeling that the police are on your side, that you can trust the police, that your concerns will be taken to heed. It's like the police using the N-word in a formal context and then expecting you to take crimes against black people seriously. That's what it is. That's how it seems to us as people who are often called TERFs for. Again, just establishing our boundaries and trying to have a discussion. That's all we want. We just want to have a discussion about the conflicts that are going to arise in different situations and how we can make sure that the systems that are put in place are safe for women without just being slurred and threatened with violence.
And again, that term TERF is used predominantly. In fact, I'm yet to see it used in relation to a male. It is predominantly used in relation to women. And anything where there is that sex bias, where women are being disproportionately impacted, disproportionately silenced, it really should cause pause for thought, particularly by the state, but by anybody who's engaging in the debate. So all of these things were going on locally, lots of action nationally as well from a number of feminist groups. And I think that the big first non-violent direct action that the Manchester ReSisters took part in happened recently and involved T-shirts and statues.
So I think this started on a Facebook group. Somebody got an idea and it just sort of spread up from there. And a lot of the groups were created to facilitate this action. And it was Feminist Icons around the UK. So in Manchester, we've got a statue of Emily Pankhurst that's just been put up, and another one of Anne Kinney. They were put up on the same date to celebrate 100 years of women's suffrage. We've also got a Gracie Field statue. So a lot of activists, dead of night, went out, used their witchcraft to put t-shirts on these statues. So, and it was across the country, Scotland, I think Wales, all these different female statues got t-shirted. People woke up going to work. What's going on over there? Basically, the t-shirt's very simple. It's just, I think it reads, woman, adult human, female. And this caused a lot of controversy. People said this is an anti-trans hate campaign. Again, the same old, which... Is the word woman transphobic? If you are offended by female biology, you are the person that has a problem, not us for raising that issue. That, you know, you need to have a think about what it is that's so triggering for you, about the reminder that women are a biological class, not like a gender class.
And I think what this did was it showed that throughout the country, throughout the UK, women are getting more and more concerned. They are getting more and more engaged in the debate and more active. I say raising public awareness and demanding that we have a right to speak on this issue. If we look to the future, what do you hope will come from Manchester ReSisters, ReSisters United, and the broader campaigns that are going on at the moment?
Well, I think it's very good. Like, there's been quite a lot of publicity from this, and a lot of interest from other women. New resistor groups are springing up across the UK, and even internationally, we've had a lot of international interest in this. They want to know about starting one in Australia or New Zealand, and this is a great thing. We're grassroots. We've not got lots of we're not, believe it or not, we're not funded by Donald Trump. We're trying to sort of do it all on the huff, but really connect and try and share expertise with each other. But we are kind of independent, so each group is free to pursue its own aims. And just arguing around this issue, it's basically the essential argument we have is that we're replacing sex with gender in law, and it's leading to an erosion of women's rights, women's sex spaces, women's rights to have certain spaces, not all spaces anyway, it's only like a few very, very small spaces where women are vulnerable, and the law does understand and protect us under the understanding that women are vulnerable and need protection, and this is being lost, and we're being silenced and demonised, and we just want to have a conversation and get the conversation starting. We want to get more women engaged, because I think a lot of this is happening and women don't understand what's good. Women and men don't understand the law is going to be changed and these could be the likely outcomes. So we want to raise awareness about that and get people talking and just be allowed to speak by the powers that be are silencing women, demonising us. And we've just had enough of it. We're not hateful. We're like most of us in the group, we're leftists, we're socialists, Labour Party members, anarchists. But we've also got conservatives in the group and more centrist women, because it's not something that only is going to affect like poor women or working class women or certain key groups. Like, it's not just going to affect lesbians. It's going to affect you. It doesn't matter if you're like the Lord Mayor of Liverpool, you can still be affected by this. If you are female, you are at risk from male violence, and it doesn't matter how high you go up in the hierarchy, that's always going to exist. And it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is, you're still going to be at risk. And so we need to make all women aware of this and get like a union, like an alliance of all women, and get them organised, get them agitating, get them angry about this, because it's not on what's happening, and we're not going to be silenced anymore. We want to do non-violent direct action protests to stir up a conversation.
So if women want to get engaged after listening to this podcast, where would you direct them to?
We have a blog site, Liverpool ReSisters United. Put links into the description. Go locally. If you're on Facebook or Twitter, contact ReSisters United and say you'd be interested in setting up a local group. We've done it all relatively quickly, like in the space of a month. So it's still like a work in progress. So get in contact. I'll leave information at the bottom of the podcast, so you can find out a bit more information.
Thank you so very much. Take good care. Bye bye.